So yeah, thank you so much for being here, everybody. Happy Imog for those of you who celebrate. It is the first and 2nd of February are really big days for the Celtic tradition. So if that's something that you're part of, then wishing you a very happy Imog today. And also happy full moon as well. Hi to everyone that's just joining. I am already recording. It's lovely to have you here. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for being here today. I have a few more people coming in. So just going to give a minute here. Hello to all. Just saying happy Imbolc and happy full moon to everybody that celebrates. And yeah, lovely to be here. Nice to see both familiar and new faces, and a really warm welcome to everybody. And yeah, let me have a look here. I do have some slides that I'm going to share today. So I'm just going to start to pull those up now. And I'll also say it is just me here today. So I might be looking at the chat a little bit or letting people in. So if I'm momentarily distracted, that's what's going on. And here we go. So I'm going to share my slides now. Please give me a heads up if you're not able to see that. It looks pretty good from my end, as far as I can tell. Thank you. I'm getting a thumbs up. That's super helpful. Thank you. All right. So welcome to this Intro to Ecosomatics class. This class is titled The Nature of the Nervous System. And today it's all going to be about how does our relationship to nature impact our nervous system and our nervous system tending practice. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what to expect from the class today. And I'm going to just share briefly about myself as well, so you have an idea of how I came to this work and my background. So my name is Robin. I run Awaken to Nature. Maybe you found me through Instagram or through other means, but what I do with Awaken to Nature is ecosomatics education. So everything I teach at this point in my work is to do with how does our relationship and our kinship with the natural world impact our nervous system. It's a really fascinating area of study that I'm really excited to share more about. Here, I also wanted to share two of the most important landscapes and ecosystems that have been with me throughout my journey of really deep kinship with nature. And really, with a class like this, I wouldn't be able to teach this without giving credit to these landscapes. So on the left here, you can see my dad on the trail there. This is the Northwest Highlands of Scotland, which are my paternal ancestral homelands. I grew up in the south of England and spent a lot of time in the Northwest Highlands. And this landscape is very ancient, some of the oldest mountains in the world here. It's an incredibly beautiful landscape. It's a lot of marshland and bog. It's coastline, mountainous. It's deeply sacred to me. And I've spent a lot of time here listening to the land. And then on the right, we have the Pacific Northwest. This is the Southern Gulf Islands of British Columbia in Canada. It's where I emigrated about 20 years ago. And this landscape as well is really important in my nature connection journey. It's where I really came into an understanding of wilderness and relationship with the wild. And this landscape too is in a way similar to the Northwest Highlands in that we have the coast and we have the mountains, although the Pacific Northwest has the temperate rainforest, of course, and some really incredible creatures. We have bear and cougar, we have the eagle and orca, and just really incredible ecosystem. So I have a lot of love for these places and for what they have taught me on my journey. I have a background in social work and environmental studies. I've been domestic violence crisis counselor, addiction therapist. I've been a forest school instructor. But probably the thing that is most relevant to my work and the thing that I have the most reverence for in my experience is having spent thousands of hours in direct communion with the land across Europe and North America. And really, it is this deep listening to the land that has really informed my work. So that is a bit about me. I'm also a single mother of 3 and a recent cancer survivor. And so my professional, personal life are both really integrated with embodied nature connection. I just want to take a second here to see if I'm missing anything on the chat. I don't think so. Would anyone be willing to just do a thumbs up if there's anything in the chat, because I am not able to see it and I'm hoping I'm not missing anything. You're good. Okay, thank you. So in this intro class, these are the pieces that I want to cover. I want to give a bit of an overview of what ecosomatics is. It's a bit of a niche subject right now, or a little bit obscure. So I'm really excited to introduce it as a bit of an emerging field and why this is so exciting in the fields of somatics and nature connection right now. I want to talk about why nature connection is so vital to our nervous system as a support and a resource. There's some really interesting science that's been coming out more and more about how nature specifically interacts with the nervous system, which I want to talk a little bit about as well. The importance of how increasing or expanding our somatic practice to include relationship with place. And what does this mean to start cultivating relationship with our local ecosystem and our local natural environment as a huge support in somatic work, and why this is actually our evolutionary inheritance and what happens when we get too far away from that. I also want to share an experiential ecosomatic practice. And I did write in the email just now that if you wish to bring a piece of nature that you're connected to this class, then we will engage with that. If you weren't able to do that, that's fine. There's other ways to do that. But if you did have a piece of nature with you today that you feel connected to, that's great. This could be a stone, it could be leaves, could be a bowl of water, could be many different things, but just some kind of piece of nature. And like I said, if you don't have that, that's okay too. But it's lovely and supportive if you do. I have a brief invitation to go deeper into this work as well, which I'm going to spend about 10 minutes sharing about, and then a Q&A at the end for any questions about this class or the upcoming program I have, or this work in general. Just a bit of an orientation here, because ecosomatics is still a little bit obscure and a little bit niche and not really in the mainstream yet. So if you're, just to see if you're in the right place here. So I feel like ecosomatics is really relevant to anybody that's interested in this work, but specifically I find that it really appeals to people that are working in the role of some kind of wellness, holistic, somatic coaching, or practitioner of a wellness modality of some kind, therapists, social workers, counselors, forest therapy guides, forest school instructors and wilderness guides, meditation teachers, and really anyone that has a personal interest in nature connection and or somatic practice. So this work is great for both people that want to bring this into their professional work, but also if it's just for you for your personal practice. This has been my path. I've worked with many clients with ecosomatic techniques in my social work career, but I've also been doing this in my personal life and with my children for many, many years as well. So it's applicable across both those areas. Before we get started with ecosomatics, I really want us to just do a brief drop in with the body and just orient ourselves to being here today. Ecosomatics is all about coming back to self and coming back to place, which are two things that we've really been conditioned to become disconnected to in the industrial West. And so I'd really love to start from this place. So I'm going to invite you just for a minute here to just, if you're feeling comfortable to do this, and if you feel like connecting in with your body is accessible to you right now, then then I really invite you to do this with me. Don't force it. If for whatever reason you're feeling like connecting in with the body doesn't feel very comfortable for you at this time, there's no need to force any of this at all. But if you are feeling ready for this practice right now, I'm just going to share a few minutes here. So I invite you just to close your eyes and take a breath in through your nose and exhale through your mouth, just making that exhale a little longer. And again, we'll take an inhale through the nose. And just a bit of a longer exhale through the mouth there. Maybe even making your lips like a straw a little bit, just to slow that exhale. And one more time here. Inhale through the nose. And exhaling a little longer through the mouth. And from here, just feeling where your body connects with the ground that is supporting you right now. It might be that you're sitting or lying down. It might be that you're actually out in nature listening to this. And just noticing where your body is making contact with the ground, the floor, wherever you might be seated or lying down. And just feeling this force of gravity that holds us to our beautiful earth and keeps us here on this planet. And feeling the air that is drawn into your lungs with each breath from our incredible atmosphere. And just noticing how you're feeling today. And from here, I also invite you to consider any elements or ecosystems or natural places that have been really important to you in your life. It might be a whole ecosystem or landscape, or it might just be one element of nature, such as a specific tree or a body of water. I just invite you to bring in your connection to this part of nature. And whether you're here in the recording live today, or if you're watching this at a later time, I invite all of us to consider how we are all being supported, not just by the people that we meet with in this circle and this work, but also by the natural elements and landscapes and creatures that have also supported and held each one of us. And how all of these natural beings, natural intelligences are part of our circle, how they've guided us and supported us throughout our lives. And just bringing in the more than human world here to be part of this work. Thank you. And when you feel that you've made some connection to yourself today and to some part of nature, I'll invite you just to come back to this room here, or this circle, this online gathering that we're all together with today. Thank you for doing that with me. Take whatever time you need to come back. If you need to have some water or stretch a little bit, whatever you need just to come back. I'll just give you a minute for that. And if you feel called to share, I'd really love for you to drop a note in the chat about either maybe how you're feeling right now, or the part of nature that you connected to there. And it can just be a couple of words. It doesn't have to be anything too in depth, but if you just wanted to share a word or two about that, just to bring these other pieces of nature in with us. And yeah, it's okay not to as well. The West Coast and the big cedar trees. Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks. And I'll keep reading those as they come in. Oh, okay. Yeah, Michigan, the forest and the creeks and the fields. Childhood trees and landscapes and feeling calm. Thank you. Wonderful. No worries at all. You're welcome just as you are, Christine. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to move into the teaching part of our class today. And I'm going to jump right in here to what is ecosomatics? What does this word mean? And right now, at this point in history, ecosomatics itself is a bit of a new field. It's kind of an emerging field. This is a really exciting time. And I will say this is specifically emerging in the industrial West, because embodied connection to nature has obviously been a practice that humans have had for hundreds of thousands of years, and many earth-based and indigenous cultures have immense knowledge and wisdom around embodied nature connection. But in the industrial West, we're starting to research this more in terms of our particular scientific modality. And so that is what I'm referring here to today. And it's not at all to discount the hundreds of thousands of years of wisdom of earth-based cultures. In my own ancestral traditions, which are from the British Isles primarily, we do see in the Celtic traditions the animist cosmology of these peoples in Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Isle of Man, Cornwall, that are still thriving today in many parts of the Isles. We see a history of animist cosmology and animist practice, which is direct relationship with the land, and a very deep understanding that the land is alive and sentient, and that we're children of the land rather than dominant over the land. These are the traditions that I have studied because they are my ancestral traditions, and so we do see this going back thousands of years. So in the West today, we're starting to come back to these understandings through the scientific method as well. So what is ecosomatics? As it is a bit of a new field, you might have noticed that there's people out there talking about ecosomatics who might have their own understanding of what it is. And so my definition and my understanding and the way I teach is pretty specific to my own work, my own experience, my own professional background, and my own personal experience with nature connection and somatics. And so it might not be exactly the same as someone else's. I don't think that this is a bad thing. I love the diversity of how this field is coming into being at this time. But just to say, this is my specific understanding, and it may or may not align with what other people are teaching as well. But my understanding is that ecosomatics is the blending of the field of somatics, which generally includes embodiment practices and nervous system tending, and really tuning into becoming aware of our felt sensations. It's also very valuable in trauma healing, and it's becoming more and more mainstream in as a therapeutic modality, which is wonderful. It's very effective. So we have the field of somatics, And then we also have the field of nature connection or kinship with nature. And this can look like a lot of different things. This can be as simple as you just like being in nature and going for a walk in nature and you feel peaceful and calm and you like to spend your time doing that, all the way up to being very involved with things like wilderness guiding or naturalist skills like flint knapping or hide tanning or building shelter, that kind of thing. There's many different ways to connect with nature. I would say the thread that probably runs through all of these different approaches with nature connection is the act of being present with nature, right? So, for example, you can go for a walk in nature, but you might be chatting with a friend or listening to a podcast, in which case you are in nature, but you're not necessarily having that kind of presence with nature. So I would say it's the practice of really cultivating presence and awareness in direct relationship with nature, which can look like a lot of different things. For me, I don't do a lot of really over involved activity in nature. For me, I just spend a lot of time hiking at this point, and that works for me. And I get so much out of that. And if I didn't have children and work responsibilities and a million other things in my life, that's probably what I would be doing with like 80% of my time is just walking around in the forest. So depending on where you are here, you might have come to ecosomatics either from the field of somatics or the field of nature connection, or maybe a bit of both. It's a little bit different for everybody. How I see it is that somatic practice can really inform our nature connection practice, because when we sit with nature through the lens of embodiment, we can drop more deeply into our relationship with nature. And then alternatively, nature connection can really help our somatic practice. When we're looking at nervous system tending and embodiment, when we bring nature connection into those practices, it's very powerful. We can do a lot with nervous system work through connecting with nature. So both of these fields really enhance and benefit the other. And this is where we see ecosomatics. So this is my understanding of it. So two definitions here that I think are important is that ecosomatics is, first of all, it's a detailed exploration of our embodied responses to the natural world. So this is when we are using interoception. So interoception is the ability we have to tune our awareness into what is happening within our bodies. This is when we turn the light of our awareness onto what we are experiencing in our bodies. What are we feeling? Are we feeling a heaviness in our gut, perhaps? Are we feeling maybe an ache or a pain somewhere? Are we feeling some kind of joy or expansion? What are the feelings that are coming up in our body? And in ecosomatics, we're using this kind of interoceptive awareness to examine and explore how we're feeling in relation to nature. So what is coming up within us through our felt sensation when we are in presence with nature? When you're sitting with a tree, what are you feeling in your body? Ecosomatics is also, generally speaking, a body of work, a field of practice and theory that supports nervous system tending through nature connection practice specifically. So if you've been in the somatic field in any way, you'll know that a lot of the work is around how do we support our nervous systems? How do we increase our window of tolerance? It's a lot about learning about how our nervous systems work and also how we can become more regulated or repattern nervous system responses that are particularly distressing or that we don't need anymore. You know, a lot of our nervous system responses arise because they are necessary for our survival at a certain time in our lives. But many of us notice that we experience a level of distress through our nervous systems that we might wish to change. When we're looking at this in ecosomatics, we're bringing in nature to support this. So it's really the world of how do different elements of nature support our understanding of how the nervous system works and how we can work with regulation. But I don't like to just focus on regulation. I don't think the aim is to always be regulated or always be in a state of calm. Life isn't like that. There's many times when we're going to be in a sympathetic or an activated state. because we legitimately are under a threat of some kind. So the goal isn't always to be regulated. At this point, my understanding of nervous system tending is just to increase our awareness of what is going on within our bodies at any given time and give ourselves space and care around what is happening. So the title of this class, Nature and Nervous System, I just spoke a little bit about nervous system tending as opposed to just regulation. Why would we need to bring nature into nervous system work? There's a lot of reasons for this. So there's many parts of nature that are innately calming and regulating for us. Not all parts of nature, of course. Nature can be absolutely terrifying. I don't know about you, but I've had some really scary encounters in nature. As I said, I lived for a long time on the west coast of Canada, which is a very wild and rugged landscape. I've had many experiences with bears. I've been lost in the mountains. I've been nearly washed away by very strong rivers. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in nature and that can harm us. Sometimes also we're at threat from other people in nature, right? And that can be really scary too if you're out there and you feel very alone. So I'm not saying that any situation in nature is going to feel calm or safe or regulating, but we can put ourselves in situations where we have a reasonable expectation that it's going to be pretty safe, right? We can choose to do these specific practices. We can go into places or put ourselves in situations that we can reasonably assume to be safe. And there are many natural areas that are just innately calming. And particularly it's coming out that blue spaces such as oceans and lakes and rivers and green spaces like the forest canopy are particularly good for this. That even just seeing images of them on a screen or like on like a picture on the wall or something like that, like the one behind me, for example, this is a cloth, that these kinds of images actually start to have an effect on our nervous system, which of course is exponential when we're actually in a place like this. When we bring nature into our nervous system, like tending or regulation practice, we're really offering ourselves an enormous potential of somatic resourcing through the support of nature. Because we came from nature, we're actually patterned in the same way that nature is. And so our biological response to nature tends to be, you know, if we're in a safe place, it's very effective because these patterns match. Often, when we're not able to regulate by other means or other somatic practices, we can step into support with nature in a way that is very effective for helping us drop into a parasympathetic state, which is that state of more rest and digest, of feeling calm. So if other somatic practices are not working very well for you in any given moment, it could be a really good time to get into a safe part of nature, because we see that in some cases, being in nature can actually have physiological effects on our nervous system within 5 minutes when we do ecosomatic practices, which is pretty incredible. If you think about any kind of modality or any kind of treatment or medicine working within that amount of time, like 5 minutes, that's pretty incredible. And it's pretty much open to all of us. It's accessible whether you're in a city or not, through, you know, city parks or also just images of nature. And we can, and it's free and it's doesn't have any side effects. So it's an incredible resource. Yes. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. This around the fractals. Absolutely. And this is exactly it, to do with the patterns, right? Because these patterns match. And we see this through our sensory apparatus. So, for example, like our auditory sense really responds to bird song, like the calming bird song or the melodic bird song. And our visual apparatus really responds to, like I said, like the water, like the sun glittering on the surface of the water, or the forest canopy, or the clouds drifting by. We come from these same biological and ecological patterns. So I think we're at such a point in human history now where really need to be coming back to this because it's so much a part of who we are, and we've become very disconnected from it in the industrial West. So these are some of the benefits that we know now that come from just being in nature in places where we feel safe. So these are all physiological processes. These are changes that we actually can measure within the body, which is really exciting because this is effects that are happening on our physical tissues, the physical matter of our bodies. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's actually going on there. But what we see here is that there's a reduction in cortisol and adrenaline, an increase in oxytocin and serotonin. There's a reduction in inflammation, which can help with healing. There's an antioxidant effect. In terms of our psychology, we see a reduction in mental fatigue and burnout, and benefits to cognitive function and memory retention, even in things such as dementia. There's a boost in our immune system. There's a reduction, generally speaking, overall with stress and anxiety and rumination and even depression. And it can also, as I said in the last slide, it can induce a parasympathetic state, which you might have heard of as the rest and digest function, which is when we're feeling safe, when we're feeling at ease, when we're happy to engage in social situations. So that kind of feeling, if you're not familiar with the specific of what the parasympathetic means, that's when we're feeling at ease and safe where we are. And they call it rest and digest because that's when we're resting and when the normal metabolic functions of the body can continue, because we're not in a state where we're trying to run from a threat or save ourselves from a threat in some way. So our body is just able to carry on its normal processes of digestion and other things and healing. Because we evolved from nature, we're naturally attuned to the cues.
I can't hear you. I actually don't know.
Oh, hang on.
Huh?
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. So, yes, because we evolved in nature, when we're in a safe part of nature, these natural cues of safety kind of just fit with our biology. Because we're created from the same biological and ecological mechanisms, we're responding to these natural cues as we just spoke about. On the flip side, disconnection from nature is therefore in itself inherently dysregulating, unfortunately, because our bodies are in this kind of chronic underlying state of stress that we know that something's a little bit off. And this isn't to scare anybody that lives in an industrial area such as a city or suburbs, because there's many ways to have a nature connection practice no matter where you are. But this is just to explain what has been found through research about this, is that when we're in primarily like human-made spaces like cities, there is a chronic low level kind of current of stress that's going on within us, because it's very overstimulating. There's a lot of noise, kind of like unnatural noise, like sirens and vehicles and all of those kinds of noises from the city. There's so much going on there, it's like cars and traffic lights and people and bicycles and just so much. It's very overstimulating. The architecture tends to be, certainly in speaking for my own culture, the architecture tends to be not really mimicking natural shapes or natural forms, which again doesn't quite fit with our pattern response. And so it's just inherently dysregulating to be outside of natural systems or ecosystems. And we do see this kind of chronic underlying stress because of that, even if we're not consciously aware of it, even if that's what we've always known or what we're most used to. There is this kind of like activation that's going on within us, because it's just our bodies are feeling like something isn't quite right, because we're not having enough of these natural cues of safety. In 2007, between 2007 2008, this was the time in human history where, for the first time ever in the history of our species, there were more people living in cities and urban areas than rural areas. This is pretty incredible. Our species is at least 250,000 years old. So this is a tiny, tiny percentage of our existence of a species that has been in urban areas, right? And until very, very recently, we were predominantly surrounded by natural spaces all the time. And we would have come from communities and families and cultures that were also steeped in nature. So we would have been surrounded by this culturally, linguistically, and physically until really recently in the history of our species. And unfortunately, we have seen consequences for mental health, which correlate with this. Again, it's not to say that living in cities is the only reason for why we're seeing rises in a lot of mental health conditions, but it does correlate. And I believe it is reasonable to say that it is part of the reason, not the only reason, but I think it's fair to say it's one of the reasons. Again, not to say that if you're in an urban area or a city, I've lived in a lot of cities, it's not to say that you can't do anything about this or you can't have a nature connection practice. We're going to talk a bit more about that too, but just to be aware of like what's going on here and why ecosomatics is so great and so important for us. What I want to touch on here is, why is nature connection so powerful for our nervous system? What's the actual mechanics of what's going on here? And what I want to say is that sensory information is key in understanding this. In the brain, you might have heard of this. There's a section of the brain that's kind of like right in the middle of the brain called the amygdala, which is understood as the part of our brain that activates when we're feeling under threat. So this is when we're feeling scared, when we're fearful. This could be from anything that we're scared about. It could be that we feel like our life is actually threatened, or it could just be that we're feeling very uncomfortable or unsafe in a situation. The amygdala responds primarily to sensory information. The part of our brain that deals with logic and thought, like the cortex, it doesn't have many pathways connecting the logic, the thought part of our brain to the amygdala. There are some pathways, but not very much. And in some of us, actually, it's been shown that there's no pathways. Actually, you can increase neural pathways between the amygdala and other parts of the brain through meditation and other kinds of neuroplasticity exercises. But generally speaking, the amygdala is overwhelmingly going to respond to sensory information. This is why we can't think our way into or out of nervous system states very easily. For those of you that are more well-versed in somatics, I'm speaking obviously here about the autonomic nervous system, but broadly speaking, when I'm speaking about the nervous system, I'm talking about whether we feel safe or not. In the context of this class, the nervous system has many functions, of course, and there's many branches of the nervous system. The purposes of this class, I'm talking about the part of the nervous system that deals with threat and level of safety, which is the autonomic nervous system. So if you're feeling stressed out, and maybe you can recall a moment like this in your life, or if you're like me, many moments in your life where you've been stressed or anxious, and you're sitting there trying to tell yourself like, it's okay, I'm going to be okay, and it's not working, right? And you're just sitting there getting even more activated. So there's a reason for why that is, because the thoughts are not making it into the amygdala. They're not reaching that part of the brain that is managing the fear and the stress and the threat. It's not to say that we don't have any impact on our fear response through thought, but overwhelmingly, the sensory world is what's going to inform our amygdala and therefore our brain about whether we feel safe or not. Sensory information, of course, is the body, right? This is what we can see, what we can feel and touch, what we can hear, what we can smell, what we can taste. This brings us right back to nature, is that there's so many cues of safety and regulation in the natural world that specifically respond to our biological patterning, is why it happens so fast, or why it can happen so fast. When we look at the autonomic nervous system and how it communicates to the brain, so the autonomic nervous system is kind of like the messenger between the body and the brain. It comes out of the brainstem and goes throughout the whole body. And the brain and the nervous system are constantly in communication, sending signals back and forth about what's going on. 80% of the communication between the brain and the autonomic nervous system is is from the autonomic nervous system, the body, the senses, taking information up to the brain. The brain then processes this information and then instructs the body on what to do. So if, for example, you're feeling really scared because you're in a situation where you don't feel safe, the sensory capacity, the sensory apparatus of your body is going to take that information, bring it up to the brain, and then the brain is going to initiate a whole cascade of responses in the body in order to respond to this threat, perceived or otherwise, perceived or real. And yeah, this is a whole host of things that can happen in the body. So if you're feeling like you're really under threat and you either need to fight or you need to run away, for example, your body's going to respond to that. There's going to be hormonal changes with adrenaline and cortisol released. Your heartbeat's going to change. Even your ability to hear and see is going to be affected. You can't hear as well, and you're not able to interpret facial cues as well. Your insulin response changes because you need to get insulin into your cells in order to either fight or run. Your immune system is affected, your metabolism is affected. There's a whole lot of processes that are initiated by the brain when it perceives sensory information as threatening. Of course, on the flip side, if you're experiencing the sensory information as safe and not under threat and that you're okay, then the brain is going to initiate a different set of responses, which is like, everything's okay. Your heart rate's going to be normal. You're not going to be activated in that way. So because of this is why ecosomatics is so incredible when it comes to the nervous system, because our bodies respond so strongly to cues in nature, as we already spoke about with the biological patterning. So for me, it's just a no-brainer to bring in ecosomatic practices and techniques into our somatic practice because it's so effective. It works so well. And there's all this science now coming out about this, which is really important to understand. I just have a picture of some trees here just to be with the imagery of nature. Another thing to understand is that the brain is predictive, because the brain is essentially just an organ in a skull that is just constantly trying to make sense of the world around us. That's what's going on, is that we have this collection of neurons and this white and gray matter in our skulls that is constantly trying to assess whether we're safe or not in the world and what we need to do to get to safety or maintain safety. The way that the brain works is largely predictive, and it tends to assess situations based on previous experiences. So if there's any kind of correlation or similarity between an experience you're having now compared to an experience you've had previously in your life, the brain is going to kind of group them together and be like, okay, this is what we can kind of expect from this situation. And it's why we can be like chronically activated by things that are no longer going on in our lives, but are similar to things that we've experienced in the past, because the brain is like, okay, this is a pattern. And the brain does this because it's efficient, essentially. The brain takes a lot of energy. The brain is a very small percent of our overall body mass, but it uses, I think, something like 20% of our overall energetic resources, because it's doing everything, it's monitoring everything all the time. So to be more efficient with this energy usage, it is predictive. It works on expectation. It can't meet a situation as if it's completely new for the first time every single time. A good analogy for this is if you imagine that you had to relearn how to ride a bicycle every time you wanted to get on a bicycle, how much effort would that be? The brain has to remember it, and it has to be able to predict it and expect it, and then use what it already knows to go into this new situation or this situation that you're in now. What's great about ecosomatics is that the more we do these practices with nature, the more conditioned we're going to be able to become within the brain to recognize nature as a source of support. And this is going to really increase our resiliency and our toolkit in times of stress. We're going to be like, okay, yes, this is something I can do. The more we do this, even if we're just doing 5 minutes a day or something like that, or just a couple of times a week, the more consistent we are with this practice, the more the brain is going to come to expect this, become used to it, become an automatic behavior for us. This is all because of neuroplasticity. The brain changes in response to what we learn and what we do. And the more we do something, the more habituated the brain is going to become to it. And so with ecosomatics, we can really start to build this in as, as an automatic part of our lives. Maybe you've already been doing this in your life. Maybe, I mean, and assuming if you're in a class like this, it's because you do have a real interest in nature connection, and you probably already do have a really good foundation in terms of reaching out to nature for, various reasons, different times in your life. So I think this is really cool to understand as well. What are some principles of practice for ecosomatics? So as I said earlier, we want to set ourselves up for success. So if you're going out specifically to work with nature for nervous system tending, nervous system regulation, prioritize safety as much as possible for optimal outcomes. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're likely to feel really unsafe. It doesn't have to be that you go out into a beautiful natural area. You don't have to be going to Yosemite or Lake Louise to do this. You can be sitting on your back porch. You can be looking out of your window at the clouds. Start where you feel comfortable. Start where is most accessible. To be able to work with nature for somatic support, safety is a huge piece, right? Because if you're not feeling safe, then it's really hard to start getting into these kinds of practices. So we want to set ourselves up for success. What are places that perhaps you know really well, you're not going to get lost, you know the ecosystem, you know what kind of animals you're likely to encounter, all of that kind of thing. Where do you feel safe already? And this is where you want to start. And it could be that it's like a forest near where you live, or it might be, like I said, it might just be sitting in your backyard, and that's fine. Be compassionate with yourself. Just see where you're at with that. And also this could completely change at different times of your life and different times of year. Where I live, we have quite extreme winters. It was minus 35 Celsius the other day. There's a lot of snow and ice. Some of the areas around here where I spend a lot of time in the summer, it's just not accessible for me now. I could get frostbite within a few minutes here right now. So it's a little bit different. So just be really conscious of what's going on today for you and for the ecosystem you're part of, and what is most accessible within that. Also make a note of what actually feels most joyful, or what makes you feel, the types of or the elements of nature that you feel really drawn to already. Perhaps you're like a water person, maybe you're someone that just loves being by the ocean. I live near the Great Lakes, and these massive, beautiful bodies of water are huge for me. I love sitting by the water. It might be the forest, it could be mountains, maybe it's the sky, it could be the night sky, it could be bird song. What are these parts of nature that you already feel really connected to, and that you already know that you have a deep kinship with? That these start here, because these are the pieces that are already nourishing you, and we can build on this and build our relationship with this. And then I would also say that a real foundational ecosomatic practice is presence and mindfulness. So when we're doing this work, we're intending to be present both with ourselves and what's going on with our own bodies, and then also what's going on with the natural world around us. To do something like a 5-minute ecosomatic practice, perhaps you want to start doing it daily or a few times a week or something like that. You want to make sure you're not being disturbed by anything else. You don't want to have your phone on. You don't want to go with a friend necessarily. It's your time to be with yourself and with nature, and just and have that time just to be present. There's a lot to say about how to cultivate an ecosomatic practice, but I would say these are the key places to start. So safety, accessibility, what you're already connected to, and can you create time that is just for you, where you can be in that state of presence with the body. And this could change, like I said, day to day. You're going to meet yourself where you're at. This is kind of the last piece I want to speak about before going into a bit of a practice. And this is why is it important to build relationship with place, and what's happening somatically when we're building relationship with place. For me, this is kind of like the deeper part of this work is when we're including nature within our sphere of relationships, we're really expanding into a wider web of belonging and kinship. We're opening ourselves up to understanding, which is an ancient human understanding, that we're not just humans in a vacuum, but we're part of a huge web of relationship of many different ecosystems, many different creatures, many different species. Perhaps you're like me and you might have lived in different parts of the world and felt a connection to many different ecosystems as well. Creating relationship, or what we could say attachment with nature, it really helps us anchor into a connection with ecological intelligence and ecological support, which is different from human support. Human support and human attachment is very important. It's absolutely vital to our well-being. But we can also have support and attachment and relationship with the natural world as well. And it's a different kind of support, but it's just as therapeutic, as healing, as necessary as human support. And if you're like me and you've come from the industrial Western culture, we have been so disconnected from this to our detriment. And we're kind of like, it's kind of like an experiment because this is the first time in the history of our planet that a species has become so disconnected from nature. And it's not really working for, I mean, we're seeing a lot of problems with this in a lot of different ways, right? So remembering that we are actually part of nature and that we have a whole wealth of relationships that we can tap into and cultivate. This can be absolutely transformative for people who have been, perhaps like me, raised in the industrial West. Nature can be a friend. It can feel like family. Nature can be an attachment figure, and it can help us understand who we are at a much deeper level, both individually and as a species. And really, I have a background in environmental studies. I did my degree in environmental studies. It was the most depressing 5 years of my life because the climate science is not good. But we need to remember, right? When I moved to Canada and started to, through a series of different things that happened, started to wake up to what was happening environmentally on the planet at this time of human history. It was, for me, it woke me up to the fact that this is the issue of our time, because if we don't have a planet to live on, we can't solve any of the other issues that we're dealing with anyway. Like, that was how it felt to me when I started to wake up to that, which was about 20 years ago. I changed my degree, changed my path in life to go into environmental studies and organic farming, because if we don't have our planet and we don't have a relationship with our natural world, then we don't have anything, right? We don't have anything. So we need to remember who we are, which is that we are relatives of a much wider ecological system. And these ecosomatic practices bring us into an embodied awareness of relationship and what it means to be in actual connection with the natural world. And and maybe I'm speaking for a lot of you when I say all of this. Most people that come to this work, it's because we have a deep love of nature and are deeply, deeply concerned with the way things are going and grieving what's happening as well. Oh, there's my dog. There she goes. Okay. And going a bit further here as well, nature, when we open up to our relationships with nature, it also helps us find meaning and purpose in our lives, right? It's much more than just nervous system work. Many of us have profoundly transformative moments of understanding when we're in natural spaces. It can give us a greater perspective and a deeper awareness of who we are. It's also immensely powerful as a resource in post-traumatic growth. Spending time in nature and tapping into the wisdom of nature, or what I see as like ecological intelligence, ecological sentience, it gives us a much wider perspective than we can get just from ourselves. Maybe you've experienced this too, of having like epiphanies or really transformative insights and moments about who you are and the things you've experienced and the purpose of your life through your connection to nature, because it gives us this huge perspective, right? When you're sitting by a beautiful scene such as the ocean or the forest, you get this expanded awareness of who you are. I remember the first time I really felt something like that, I was very young, must have been like 8 or 9, and it was seeing the night sky really clearly. That was in the Northwest Highlands of Scotland. And for the first time I ever remember seeing so many stars in the sky, because there's no light pollution up there, and just the awesomeness of that, right? And we can experience that in so many different parts of nature, of just being like, wow, we're just these beings living out our lives in this cosmos. And that's a really profound, those kinds of things are very profound moments for us. So at this point, I do want to do a bit of a practice here. Did anybody want to speak about any of this? That I feel like that was a lot of information shared there. I spoke for a bit longer than I intended to on all of that, actually. But if you wanted to say anything here, any questions, any comments, I'm going to just have a drink of water and give a moment for that. Okay. You might want to just check in with yourself for a minute too, see if your body needs anything right now after sitting and thinking. Yes, Christine, I had set aside an hour and a half for this class, which means that for you it would finish, I think, at 6:30, because I think you're in the UK. For me, it's 1:30. Thanks, Nadine. That's lovely to hear. Thank you. All right. So, oh, yes, no worries. The recording will be there. So for this practice, I invite you just to make yourself comfortable. And if you do have a piece of nature with you, then please bring that into your space right now. You might wish to hold it, or maybe have it in your visual field. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. And yeah, if you want to show me, that's awesome too. Yeah, wonderful. And so just holding this piece, just connecting in with how it feels. And I invite you to close your eyes, but if you're feeling really drawn to the visual part of this piece, then you can keep your eyes open, but maybe just use a soft gaze and try to just focus in on this one piece. And we'll just take a breath here. So in through the nose. And exhaling a little longer through the mouth as before. And again here in through the nose. And exhaling through your mouth. And one more time here, we'll inhale through the nose. And exhaling through your mouth. And with this piece of nature that you're holding, we will start to connect in with this piece. If you don't have a piece with you, then I invite you to call into your mind's eye a part of nature that you feel connected to. It could be a tree that you really love, could be a rock that you sit by, or a river that you walk by, but just call to mind a part of nature that you have some connection with. And with these pieces, I want you just to notice which aspect of this part of nature is really drawing your attention right now. Is it the feel, like the texture? Maybe it's rough or smooth or wet or dry or rough. Maybe it's the color or some aspect of light and shade. Maybe it's the movement of it, such as leaves in the wind or clouds drifting. It could be the scent. Or even the sound. And just notice which aspect is really drawing your attention and what really connects you to this piece of nature right now. And when you have a grasp of that, I invite you to really sit with this and feel where it's landing in your body if this feels comfortable for you. If there's any distress in connecting into your body, then don't force it. You can always just come out of the meditation and just sit for a while. That's fine. But if it feels comfortable, just notice where in your body this part of the sensory piece of nature is arising within you. And notice how it feels in your body. Is it a calming feeling? Is it perhaps a heaviness? Is there any imagery? What is it that comes up as a felt sensation or felt impression within you? And if it feels good to do this, just allow it to expand within you. And from here, I also invite you to see if there is any kind of meaning that can be made from this. Is there a word or some kind of insight or understanding that accompanies this felt sensation that gives you a little more understanding of how this piece of nature is interacting with you at this time? It could be some form of insight or inner knowing, or it could be a word or a phrase. It could just be a feeling that something here is meaningful. And this is where we bring in the cognitive understanding of the felt sensation. This is where our body connects in with our mind to make sense of our experience with nature. And as you sit with this, you might notice that you can go even deeper into this a little. You might find that you can find another edge of this felt sensation that gives you a bit more detail. And allow this to unfold if it feels right and if it's there for you at this time. And just gathering any last few pieces here of this experience or of what this part of nature wishes to share with you through your embodied sensation. And I will invite you to start to come back. And if it feels appropriate, you may wish to express some gratitude to this part of nature or some form of care, bringing them into your web of kinship. Feeling how the elements that make up this piece are the same elements that make up your own body as well. And I invite you to come back here. And if you need a minute to settle yourself or stretch or have water, maybe even make a note of anything that arose, then there's a minute for that. And really, what I wanted to offer with this experience was just a taste of how we experience nature through the body. And also how our minds can make sense of this experience as well, to gain a bit of a deeper understanding of the nature of the relationship, which you may or may not have received, and that's okay. Sometimes it can take quite a bit longer to sink into an experience like this, but given the basic foundations here, you can also try this anytime. You can go out into the forest or wherever you are to do practice such as this at any time that's right for you, and just noticing these two pieces, which is what is the felt sensation that is arising, and then is there any meaning that can be made out of it? And there doesn't have to be any meaning made out of it, but this can be really interesting as well. And sometimes the meaning can be very obvious and something that you really feel like you need to understand. But sometimes just the sensory connection is more than enough to feel a sense of safety or calm or connection. When we do this kind of sensory practice with a part of nature that we feel some sort of connection with or feel drawn to, as I mentioned previously, it can start to have physiological effects within our body really fast. And so this kind of practice can be really useful if you are feeling that you're at a point where you're feeling very stressed or very activated by something and you need a bit of space or you need some time to recalibrate, doing a practice like this is fantastic for that. So I hope that I've given you something that you can work with going forward. But like I said, it's just a bit of a taste. There's a lot more we can do with these kinds of practices, but that's a really good foundational one. So thanks for doing that with me. Before we go, I do want to share briefly about an upcoming program for anybody that wants to go more deeply into this work. Starting on February 22nd, I am releasing my first full program about this specifically, just focusing right in on nature and the nervous system. It's called Somatic Nature, and it's a 12-day immersion program where a class will be released every day for 12 days, but it's on demand and you'll have access to this class for at least a year, so you don't have to do it all within 12 days. As I said, starting February 22nd, about a 30-minute class will be released every day for 12 days, and it's going to be about these subjects. I'm just going to go over it really quickly. I won't do a huge in-depth piece here, but the first day we're going to do an introduction, so we'll really get into a bit more about the detail and definition of what ecosomatics is. We're going to be looking at how nature can help repattern our nervous system in day 2 in ways that decrease stress and increase our window of tolerance and start to wire our relationship with nature into our bodies through neuroplasticity. We're going to look at how nature can be an anchor for us on day 3. This is how we can anchor into safety and start to understand co-regulation with nature. On day 4, we're going to be looking specifically at the brain, the central nervous system, and how nature affects the brain. So this is looking at what happens with our brainwave states. This is attention restoration, the effects on our cognitive ability and memory, and also brain-heart coherence. Day 5, we're looking at contingency and witnessing with nature. So this is how we can, this is something I'm really interested in, is how nature helps us feel seen, how we can be held unconditionally by nature, and all the emotions or the difficulties that we are dealing with in our life that we don't feel safe to bring to other people in our life necessarily, how we can bring this to nature and feel fully seen and understood and held, which is a concept in psychology and somatics it's really crucial for our sense of safety and well-being in the world, and nature is a profound resource for this. Day 6, we're going to be looking specifically at attachment with nature and attachment dynamics and how we can really start to expand and include the natural world within our sphere of relationships. What does it mean to build a secure connection with nature? Really interesting area of study, actually. Day 7, we're going deeper into the relational aspect of ecosomatics. What I'm interested in here is how nature can expand our sense of self to in a way that we understand that we are a series of relationships, that the self is a series of relationships. When we look at ecological systems, that's really what it is. It's connections between pieces. And how can we have that deeper understanding of ourselves? How can we have a more complex understanding of ourselves through relationship with nature? Day 8, we're going to be looking at navigating really strong emotions with nature. So how can we engage with nature during times of acute stress, grief, and other strong emotions as a supportive practice? Day 9, we're going to be looking at neuroplasticity, something that's also really exciting. Neuroplasticity is just so fascinating as a process in the brain, how the brain changes and learns and responds to different life experiences. And on day 10, we're going to be bringing nature into that. How can we look at the brain as a garden? How can nature influence the neuroplastic processes in our brain and enhance our ability to create changes in our minds and our bodies, our nervous system patterns and responses, and therefore our lives? Day 11, we're going to be going over somatic resourcing with nature. So what are some really practical somatic resources and steps that we can do for nature-led somatic resourcing? This is going to be really heavy also on visualization and nature-guided imagery for people that are not able to access nature very easily. We can do a lot with visualization. It has been shown more and more these days that visualizing things can have quite quite a big impact on the physical matter of the brain, just visualizing things rather than physically doing them. So it does work to engage with visualization, guided meditations, nature imagery to create some of these changes as well, if you're not able to get out into nature for whatever reason. And then on the last day, we'll be integrating all of the material and closing out, and then going through the next steps of how you can continue an ecosomatic practice. So this is the outline of the 12 days. Like I said, it is 12 days, but you have however long you need to complete it. You don't have to do it within 12 days. You'll have access to it for at least a year, and hopefully longer. But I feel like a year is what I can legitimately guarantee. So for $87 right now, this is the early bird price. It goes up on February 15th. There's about 5 hours worth of video class. I'm including at least 4 guided meditations for this, maybe more, but at least 4. So 2 hours of the guided meditations, homework, so you can really take this into your personal practice, and a PDF workbook. So it's about about 10 hours minimum of material, and access to updated material as it becomes available, because I'm always learning more about this and adding to the material. So that is my offer. And I'd love to see you there if this is something you'd like to do. This is great if you are interested in it just for your own personal reasons and personal practice, but also if you are a wellness practitioner of some kind, these techniques will also be applicable to your practice. Obviously, you have to check your own scope of practice and your licensing and regulation in your jurisdiction of where you are. But there, if you are working in the role of some form of wellness practitioner or mental health professional, I'm pretty confident you'll be able to use some of these techniques with your clients as well. I also want to talk a bit about why ecosomatics is so critical right now, because we are at a tipping point in human history of becoming really disconnected from the self and nature. And if you're interested in nature connection and or somatics, this is probably why, right? It's probably because you have felt disconnected from both of these parts of our world. And I think at this point, and I'm really excited about this, obviously for my own work, but I feel like both these fields, somatics and nature connection for health and well-being, are projected to be growing substantially over the next few years. I think the science of both of these fields is becoming more and more evident. There's much more research being done all the time in both areas, and I think it's only going to become more and more mainstream. And so getting into this field now and really getting ahead of these practices, I think it's a fantastic time to be doing it, and it's really exciting. I speak for myself coming from industrial culture, because we've been so disconnected from the body and from the natural world. And there's a huge yearning to come back to both of these pieces now. And we're really feeling how much this has been at a detriment to us as a species. So those of us that are engaged in somatics and nature connection, we already know all of this. And ecosomatics is just this incredible untapped field that's just arising at this time where we can really bring these together. And so I'm really excited about it. If you're interested in learning with me, then I'd love to see you there. And I thank you so much for being here and spending your Sunday, the full moon and Imbolc and whatever else you have going on. I know it's a really wild time in the world for many of us right now. I appreciate your time being here with me today. If you had any questions or anything to ask about anything that I've shared here today, I will be sticking around until 1:30. So I'm here for any conversation, and it's just been lovely to share this space with you. So thank you so much. Yes, you're so welcome. Thank you for being here. Yes, you're welcome. You're so welcome. And I will send out the link for the early bird price for anyone that's interested as well. Yes, thank you. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see familiar faces and new faces. And thanks everyone for being part of the the nature connection movement, because it's just, we really need it. Yes, thank you. You're very welcome. Wonderful. Thank you, Nadine. Be just an absolute honor and pleasure to have you. Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you so much. Yes. So, in terms of the guided meditations, is that is that what you mean there? Yes. So it would be a guided meditation. It will have music, and it will be, I'll outline what the practice is and what to expect from it before the practice starts. So just to orient you to what that particular practice is for and what it's about. And then it will be the practice. Um, this class, it it won't specifically teach you how to do that with others as such, although the techniques that I'm going to be sharing and the theory behind all of it will be applicable to depending on what it is that you do with clients. There'll be ways that you can work with that, and I'm also interested in creating something that's more specific for practitioners as well. That's on my radar for a little bit later in the year, but certainly you'll be able to take a lot of the theory and the practice from this and apply it to what you're already doing. But for more specifically guiding people as an ecosomatic practitioner, that's something I'm going to be doing a bit later in the year. Just taking your dog along. Well, Emily, I think it definitely can do. I don't know. I think it depends a little bit on the dog. um, yes, the course is asynchronous. It's all on demand. Yes. I did run one that was in not in person but synchronous just now online, and I found that it's just so hard to get everybody together at the right time that it was, and most people were just doing it on demand anyway. So I'm going to try it this way now, but I might end up doing some drop-ins for people that want some in-person contact as well, because I know that's important. So the dog, okay, my dog doesn't work very well for me in terms of doing an ecosomatic practice, because if I sit still in the forest for very long, she gets really agitated and she starts jumping all over me, and she's like, what are we doing, what are we doing? She's very high energy. So my particular dog, I don't take her for when I'm doing ecosomatic practice, actually. So I have to go out by myself, and then I have to come back and then take my dog for a walk. But if you do have a dog that's a little I don't know, maybe a little calmer than mine at least, and is happy to just sit there for a little bit while you're doing your practice with presence and just having that slow awareness, then it can absolutely work. And even just sitting with a dog can be a form of ecosomatic practice, in my opinion. When I worked in domestic violence a few years ago, and I used to take my dog to work, and she was so loved by my clients, just because just having an animal in the office doing intake was so valuable for so many clients. So many people felt that real sense of safety and calm and just like love from having a dog there. Obviously not for everybody, but many people. So yeah, it's really going to depend on your dog, and I would say give it a go, see what happens. If you feel like you're able to get into the practice with your dog, then that's great. But it doesn't always happen. Yeah. Yeah, you're so welcome. I'm a huge dog person. I'm big into dogs. Yeah. Do I have recommended? I have, yeah, I have, I do, Allison. I have a lot of recommendations. So for specifically nature connection and psychological well-being, there's a really good book called The Nature Fix by Florence Williams. There's also a really interesting book called Blue Mind. But what I have done myself in putting this material together is usually taking from both fields and integrating them. So I've done a lot of study with like polyvagal theory, and it's a professor called Stephen Porges is really, I want to say influential. I think he came up with polyvagal theory. So his work is really valuable. There's an incredible neuroscientist called Lisa Feldman Barrett, I'll just write that out. And she has written a lot about how the brain works. So she doesn't write specifically about nature connection, but having a deeper understanding of the brain has been really fascinating through some of her work. She has a really good book called How Emotions Are Made. Yeah, and Stephen Porges for polyvagal theory. So those are just a couple right off the top of my head, but also Peter Levine in the world of somatics has been really huge. Yeah, and then, but in terms of like how the brain and nature interact, it's mainly what I have done is mainly looked through scientific studies because there's not a huge amount out there specifically on those two fields coming together. But if you are someone that likes reading through scientific papers, you can type that into Google and it will come up with studies. Like if you look for like scientific research on nature and the nervous system, that kind of thing. Then there's a lot of studies out there. It's really, really interesting. If you're someone that has the time or the inclination to pick through that kind of thing, I would recommend it. Yeah, absolutely. And there's probably like 100 more that are just not popping up for me at this moment. But in the classes that I teach, I always share the resources and I always cite where I've gotten my material from. So I always add that in because with all of this, there's so much information, and I find that when you find one piece that you're just really interested in, then that's the one that's really that's the piece that's compelling for you to go into. So I love to provide all the different resources so you can be like, no, this is the thing I really want to know. I want to know about this part of the brain. Like I want to know about the amygdala, or I want to know about the reticular activating system, or whatever it is, and go into that. So yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody. Wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad it landed with you. I'm glad it was valuable. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you. Love to see you there. All right, everyone, have a beautiful Sunday. Thank you for sharing your space with me and hope to see you again somewhere in the world.